This is work with my dear old friends, Jean-Charles and Stéphane. And so, okay, let's start from the beginning. Cryptocurrency, there's crypto and there's currency. Currency, what is it? It's something I accept as payment for my services or my goods, because I anticipate that in the future, when I want to buy services or goods, people are going to accept the currency from me. So that's what a currency is. It's a mean of payment, but it also has to be a reserve of value, because if the value of the currency drops before I can use it, it's not going to be a means of payment. And so the question is, how can this thing be valuable? And the answer is, it's valuable if and only if we think it's valuable. So the only collateral really for a currency is the beliefs that we have in its value. You know, the dollar is not backed by collateral. The dollar is backed by the fact that we think the dollar is valuable. The dollar is a bubble. The euro is a bubble too, right? Nothing specific. Okay, so now, if we go to cryptocurrencies, you know, they're no different. You know, Bitcoin, something you can use to make a payment if people accept it. And why would they accept it? Because they anticipate it's going to be accepted in the future. Bitcoin is a bubble, just like the euro. Of course, it's a slightly worse kind of bubble than the dollar or the euro, because it's a lot more volatile. And so we have this paper with my co-authors in which we say, you know, the collateral of the currency, the fundamental of the currency is basically the belief we have in the currency. And if the beliefs are moving a lot, even if we have rational expectation equilibrium, if the beliefs are moving a lot, the price is moving a lot. So that's maybe one of the main differences between Bitcoin and dollar. It's the volatility of beliefs. But then we have still not answered the question. Yes, Fahad.
Saying that sort of volatility of beliefs is the differentiator. Is there a fundamental reason why, due to the structure of a cryptocurrency, it should have more volatile beliefs than potentially like a badly run government fiat or something?
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's a very important and good question. And I think Bitcoin has more volatility than dollar or euro, but it doesn't really have more volatility than the Naira, which is the Nigerian currency, or the Turkish lira.
People would argue that U.S. policy recently hasn't been tremendous. And so is there like a fundamental reason why the cryptocurrency or crypto asset should have more volatility in their beliefs than any fiat, I guess? Because you're alluding to like an empirical observation. Like
Yes.
volatile.
Is
there something deep about why it is?
You're right. In this paper, we're trying to give some answer, but it's only limited. But let me try just now to give you a preview of the argument. Of course, you know, when we think about the fundamentals and the pricing, the beliefs are very important, but it's also the monetary policy. So if the monetary policy is very unreliable and can go very wrong, and then we have beliefs about the possibility that it goes wrong, it's going to affect the price. So maybe the reason why the dollar or the euro are not that volatile is maybe because, after all, the American government is good. Even maybe the European Central Bank is okay. But other currencies or other official currencies, the government is not so good. And that's possibly why there is a lot of volatility in their currency. I know it's not a complete answer.
Always a question of the denominator. Maybe Bitcoin is stable and the dollar.
Yeah, that's true. And so, to the extent that we are taking the denominator to indicate that Bitcoin is more volatile, then we still have not answered. The question was, why is Bitcoin useful? And so far what I've told you is Bitcoin is doing almost as well as the euro and the dollar, but not as well because it's too volatile. So that's not a sufficient reason to use Bitcoin. There must be something else. And so that's where I want to say the US government is great. But some other governments on the surface of the earth are not as good. And so maybe, like countries like Turkey or Nigeria, government policies have been a bit erratic, and the currency has been fluctuating and depreciating. So if you live in Nigeria, maybe, yeah, the Bitcoin is volatile, but compared to the Naira, it's quite good, actually. It's much more valuable, much more. If you hold Naira, you kind of know it's going to go down. And if you own Bitcoin, 50% chance it goes up, 50% chance it goes down. It's a bit better. More volatility, but better. So, and then there are other reasons. If you live in Lebanon, and in Argentina also this happened, you can have situations in which your money in the bank just cannot be used. So yeah, people say, oh, let's dollarize, let's hold dollars. But if you hold dollars in Lebanon and they are at the bank, there are points in time at which you just can't use your dollars because this banking system collapses. So at this point, maybe having the ability to use the blockchain is kind of another way to register and transfer money that is less susceptible to be affected by misbehavior or political crisis. Yes.
Could you solve these problems just by tokenizing dollars? Why do you need Bitcoin?
So maybe this is one of the reasons why some central banks are trying to do CBDCs. I think in the mind of some of the central bankers, there is this notion that cryptocurrencies are competition to their own currency, and they want to be able to compete by having CBDCs. Now, as you guys know, there is blockchain and blockchain. Some blockchains are public, and others are more consortium or private. So far, central banks are kind of happy to consider consortium or private blockchains because they can control them and permission them. But public blockchain is not something that central banks are very happy with. So tokenizing dollars, and another way to tokenize dollars is stable coins. And Lebanon, for example, I actually met a guy who's doing business in Lebanon. And when there was this banking crisis in Lebanon, he was doing import-export with the US. That's what he did. He was using stable coins, dollar stable coins. So that's really going in your direction.
Funny comment. The dollar has already been digitized. So is there a need for a CBDC?
You're right. It's digitized because, for example, when I use my credit card, it's right. And so that's where I agree with you. And when there's a lot of confusion about the use of the word digital, I think digital is not the same thing as crypto. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Since we are talking institutions, and this year Nobel Prize was on institutions, right? So do you think this cryptocurrencies can spur the growth or the demand of the institutions or a good institutions locally? Because you discussed Lebanon, we have example of El Salvador. You get the question, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And this is one of the points I will be trying to make with my little theoretical model, is that in a sense, by being competition to the monetary authority of the country, maybe the presence of the cryptocurrency can discipline. And so that's one of the points I'm going to try to make.
Someone will do the event analysis instead of malaria cryptocurrency adoption.
Oh. So, okay, this is, anecdotal evidence. Well, that's what it is. Yes.
We only seem to remember that crypto does rely on infrastructure.
Does not?
Does rely on infrastructure.
Yes.
Crypto is not working overnight. The communication fall down. There's no electricity.
If you have no electricity, it's going to be very hard to use internet. I agree. It's true. So this is some data I found. You know, I'm not an empiricist. So they have a survey across 56 countries, and they ask people, you know, do you use crypto? Do you own crypto? And so these are the 12 countries in which the percentage of respondents that use crypto is the lowest, and these are the 12 countries in which it's the highest. And so, you know, low cryptocurrency is boring countries like, you know, France or Sweden or Denmark or Canada. but you know, crypto countries are much more exciting. And in particular, we have our usual suspects, Nigeria and Argentina and Turkey. And Lebanon is not here because it was not even part of the survey.
As a Swiss, I feel obliged to say Switzerland's on that list, and I don't think Switzerland is that exciting, but you probably are.
How can you say such a thing? It's true. We have two interesting cases, Switzerland and China, in a sense, are a little bit idiosyncratic, each one in its own way. Yeah, you're right. You know, in the case of Switzerland, I think there's this deep distrust of centralization, and which might explain the fact that they like the idea of decentralized currency. But you're right, that's a good point. And so I think, you know, the question is, why would cryptocurrency be useful? And I think they can be useful because they can, in a sense, provide a better monetary policy with commitment. And so if you live in a country where there is bad monetary policy, maybe it's good. They, as Gur was saying, if you don't have electricity, it's not going to work. But if you have electricity and access to internet, you can do things even with banks don't work anymore. To some extent, it's protecting you against taxes. Of course, as a Frenchman, I think it's bad to avoid taxes. But and it's also a way to bypass cost and barriers to international flows. So I think these are the reasons why, you know, we should not be too ashamed of working on cryptocurrency. They can be useful in some cases. I think they can be useful when the institutions are not working well. And I think, you know, this was exactly, I think, this is my reading of what Nakamoto was trying to do. Nakamoto said, we're going to try to have payments without institutions. And why do we want to have payments without institutions? Well, it's when institutions don't work. And in the Genesis block of Bitcoin, they had you know, it was a title from the London Times that said, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. So that they thought, oh, that's really bad. That's bad monetary policy. And so because monetary policy is going down the drain, we want to be different. And so, okay, but some people don't like this idea. Some people say, no, cryptocurrencies are bad. And they are bad because they are threatening. Even if you have a good monetary policy, it can be threatened by the presence of the crypto. And then finally, this is my libertarian moment. For a Frenchman, you know, this is quite special. So Hayek said it would be great to have replacement of the government monopoly of money by competition in currency supplied by private issuers who, to preserve public confidence, will limit the quantity of their paper issue and then maintain its value. So there's this notion that maybe cryptocurrency would play that role. Let's see. And so ultimately, this is a theoretical question. You know, those of you who are not in economics, usually in a seminar in economics, people say, ultimately, this is an empirical question. So the good thing about crypto, and that's why I'm working on crypto, is, you know, essentially it's when it's not there yet, you know, you cannot have data. So we're going to use a model to address that question. So what do we have in our model? It's a very simple endogenous growth model with a continuum of agents. And there will be money. Agents can hold money, and money can be the official currency created by the government, or cryptocurrency minted by a protocol. And we're going to try to take into account a form of risk in the cryptocurrency, which will be the risk that a crypto can crash. And then in this economy, there will be production. It's an endogenous growth economy. So we're going to invest things in a production process and create goods. And the agents are going to do that. But their production technologies are risky. And so the agents now, they will face a portfolio choice between holding money and investing in the production technology. And then in this economy, we will have a government. The government doesn't know how to operate the production technology, so only the agents can do that. The government is going to create money and also is going to be able to tax or subsidize. So basically, the government is going to do public spendings, and those public spendings can be financed by seigniorage, the government sells money, or taxes. So what are the results from this model? Well, we're going to have a parameter that will reflect the extent to which the government is benevolent. So a benevolent government is a government whose objective will put a lot of weight on the welfare of the citizens. A non-benevolent government will not put a lot of weight on the citizens. So if the government is, let's look at the case in which the government is not benevolent. Then in that case, without crypto, bad things happen for the citizens because the government is hyperinflating and taxing a lot, and this reduces the welfare of the citizens. But when there is crypto is going to do two things for the agents. For a given monetary policy, if the monetary policy is bad, I, as a citizen, can use the crypto. That's one thing. Second thing, the fact that there is this competition from crypto will have an effect on what the government does. The government will not be able to go too far towards inflation, because otherwise people will just stop using the government currency and use the crypto. Yes?
I guess other than maybe like frictions or like bank sanctions, what's the, why can't like the same model be used with like a stable currency like dollar or euro instead of crypto?
So that's a good point. So I'm living in Nigeria.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
The government can block usage of the US dollar.
Yeah. Or the government can block use of US dollar. For example, it's going to be difficult to have it in a bank, or people will use the cash, will use the banknotes. But, going around in Nigeria with a lot of dollar banknotes, not great. So there is an element of blockchain technology being a good way. Yes, Catherine.
Yeah, I'm practical, I guess. But like you were mentioning taxes, I wonder what you assume about where the taxes are easier to collect, because one could argue that compared to the suitcases of US dollars, taxing crypto is easier. And if you have a non-benevolent government, wouldn't it bit like offset this one?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Catherine. You're quite right. We don't have that in the model. That would be a good thing to have. In
fact, in the US, we are big. I mean, as you know, the US is kind of behind in thinking about CBDC and things like that. And part of the concern is exactly what you were saying, that is, once you allow taxation to be algorithmic, the government, it is a major devolution of power.
Yeah.
Towards the government.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying one point of view, but
No, I think this is a very good point. To what extent can the government tax crypto is a difficult question. Here in the model, we're going to assume it cannot.
it's hard.
But yeah, that's really what we mean. It's likely to be harder to tax crypto than money, official currency on your bank account. But Catherine, what you're saying is that, but the suitcase with dollars, that's going to be even more difficult than crypto to tax. You're right. And so we don't have that in the model, and that's a good point. Yes, Cam.
Bruno, isn't the degree of competition with the official currency limited, given that the government will pay its employees in the official currency and demand taxes being paid in the official currency? So think of France, where that's over 50% of the population being paid.
I 100% agree with you. I'm going to surprise you. I had this typology of benevolent government and non-benevolent government. France was with the US in the category of benevolent governments. You might doubt that empirically. All right, so here is the model. Mass one continuum of agent, discount rate row, log utility. Only one good, can be consumed or invested in a production technology, constant return to scale, idiosyncratic productivity risk. I am Mr. I. At time t, the amount of capital I'm investing is KIT. I can hold this or hold money. I'm trying to maximize my expected utility, the present value of the utility of my consumption. And there is an expectation because my consumption in the future will be risky, in particular because I'm investing in a technology that is risky. So each agent I has this amount of capital. Total capital in economy is the sum of agents' capital. What is my output? So I'm agent I. I have a certain expected return. And then I have a risk, which is going to be a Brownian motion. And we're going to say that the Brownian motions of the different agents are IID. They're independent. It's idiosyncratic risk. It's complicated to say that about Brownian motion, but we take first finite number of agents and then limit to solve that problem. And so total production in economy is total amount of capital multiplied by return on the technology. So now here is the government. So again, I'm not going to be very French here. I'm going to say, oh, the agents, what they like is consumption. Huh? Remember? That's what they like. The government, to some extent, puts some weight, beta, which is the degree of benevolence of the government, on the welfare of the agents, but also the government puts 1 minus beta on government spending. So here I'm making the assumption that government spending are not useful at all for citizens, which, I'm not sure I 100% believe that, but it's a simplification, and we could have a weight for the agents just lower than 1 minus beta, and that would be it. Okay, so basically you can think of this as, Nigeria, what they call public spending is actually shipping money to Switzerland. All right. So what can this government do? Government can tax wealth. So that's wealth in physical capital and official currency, but not in Bitcoin. Government can, so the policy of the government will be to spend as public spending a constant fraction of the capital stock. And then there's going to be a monetary policy, which will be a constant growth of the money supply, and that will give rise to a certain level of inflation. Okay? And then the budget constraint is that spending is equal to taxes plus seigniorage. So if you know me, you know I like mechanism design. And so we have another paper in which we show that under certain assumptions and without cryptocurrency, this is the implementation of an optimal mechanism. So if you were worried about micro foundations, maybe you're not. So agents in this world, they're facing a Merton 1969 problem. They are maximizing expected utility of lifetime consumption. They can invest some in a risky asset, some in a safe asset, which is, first I'm going to look at the equilibrium without crypto. Okay, so in equilibrium without crypto, I am going to assume that we are looking at the equilibrium in which the value of dollar is deterministic. There's not going to be a crash in the dollar. The only thing there will be inflation. And inflation in our simple world will be deterministic. So I can invest, so I can consume. I'm facing a Merton problem. I can consume and I can invest. Some of my investment will be in safe asset and some will be in risky asset. I will, because of log utility, I will consume a constant fraction of my wealth, and this fraction is going to be my rate of impatience. If I'm more impatient, I consume more. And my portfolio choice will be to put a certain fraction of my wealth in the risky asset. The fraction of my wealth I put in the risky asset is increasing in the productivity, in the expected productivity of the risky asset, decreasing in the risk of the risky asset, and also the fraction of my wealth I'm going to put in the risky asset is increasing in the inflation. Another way to think about this is the fraction of my wealth I will put in the money will be decreasing in inflation. Okay, so if there's a lot of inflation, I don't put my wealth in money, I put it in real assets. All right. And then, so the growth rate of the economy will be the expected productivity of the production technology minus consumption of the government, minus the consumption of the agents.
You allow for real asset investment in the model, or is it just the crypto?
So in the model, I have my wealth and I put some of my wealth in money. For the moment, we don't have crypto. Some of my wealth in safe asset, dollar, and some of my wealth in real asset, productive real asset, but risky. Other questions? Yes.
Sorry, not an economist, so everything I say is going to be nonsense. But
no, it's the other way around. If you were an economist.
let me caveat that because I'm a lawyer, so it's definitely all nonsense. I love the question that your talk poses, but so far, all you've talked about is whether or not crypto will replace currency and whether or not crypto is an investment. Isn't there also the question of whether the crypto functions within the ecosystem and drives that economy as opposed to, and wouldn't that be economically significant if that economy grew big enough as a proportion of the larger economy? And I mean individual ecosystems. So Ethereum is an ecosystem, Bitcoin is an ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera. And the analogy I would draw is like your question is sort of like, do frequent flyer miles matter, right? And the answer to that probably depends on the airline, right? From an economic standpoint. And so I think that's maybe the third part of your talk that hasn't happened yet.
So it's so great, you know, it's very hard for me to understand what the computer scientists talk about. But actually, it's even harder for me to understand what the lawyers are talking about. So it's a great experience for me. I think
for my caveat of all nonsense.
I think that maybe I'm not going to answer to your question. I'm going to answer to something which I think I understood in your question, and maybe I'm wrong. So here I'm looking only at a subset of what the crypto universe can do for us, and that's being used as a currency, as a means of payment. There are other things, other good things about the crypto universe, smart contracts, tokenization, And these things are not featured in my talk and in my model, although I believe they're important. So I don't know if it's an answer to what you're saying.
So I don't want to take up too much time. That's one piece of it, but think about my example of frequent flyer miles.
Well, that's the one which I really have a hard time with that one. I don't see the point at all.
Okay, so frequent flyer miles draw me into an ecosystem. And I can use those frequent flyer miles in that ecosystem, but not outside of that ecosystem, or minimally outside of that ecosystem. A lot of layer 1 tokens are very useful within an ecosystem. And the question of whether or not they will be useful outside that ecosystem may be irrelevant as long as the ecosystem is really using it. So let me put it another way. To a large extent, Japan cares about the value of the yen vis-a-vis other currencies. But most everyday Japanese people don't care that much because all they care about is whether or not my yen are gonna buy me whatever it is that I need to buy to get through the day.
I think it's, you know, it's a good, I think your point is a very good illustration of the Buddhist doctrine, you know, it's karma, you know, you're doing to me what I've been doing to the others. And I should, you know, I should realize, well, I'm not sure I can answer, but maybe we can talk later.
You already answered this question.
I have a question. It's a technical question. You have a continuum of agents. How do you find the equilibrium? Like, what's the notion of equilibrium we are using? Because
competitive equilibrium, rational expectation.
right, but you have a continuum of agents, right? So how do you define the unilateral deviations there?
No, there are no deviations. It's competitive equilibrium. It's not Nash. Huh?
I see. So it's not Nash equilibrium. Okay. Yeah.
That being said, we actually start with a finite number of agents.
Then you take the limit as and goes, okay.
I think there was a question at the back.
It wasn't a question, I just wanted to answer that question, like,
Okay, then be my guest.
I was just gonna say, like, generally building a system that is, like, for example, if you want Ethereum to be black boxed as Ethereum only being useful within Ethereum, right, and not having an impact. So, like your frequent flyer example, the problem here is that if I have a stake outside of Ethereum, I'm infringing on the entire security of Ethereum, and I can hold Ethereum and have like negative intentions or like a profitable scenario where the ecosystem fails, and creating it, like intentionally creating a system that only exists in a black box is sort of like a dangerous way to create, I think, like a cryptocurrency.
Right, but so no. That's it. We'll go back to the paper. So I know it's more boring, but still. Okay, so now you take these equations, and this is what this is telling you what is the choice of the agent, the portfolio choice. So here is the percentage of my wealth I put in money. Remember, no crypto for the moment. And this is growth of money supply, and this is public spending. So if you increase inflation, growth of money supply, and public spending, you raise this, more inflation, I want to put more of my money in the real assets. And so the fraction of my wealth I'm going to put in the real asset is going to be increasing in the degree to which the government is trying to rip me off. All right. So now the government is taking into account the equilibrium, what's going to happen in the market, and then choosing the policy to maximize its own objective function, taking into account the reaction of the agents. And the government is going to choose monetary policy, growth of money supply, fiscal policy, or whatever, public budgetary policy, how much they spend. And they anticipate that X was going to increase with GM plus gamma. So what are the costs and benefits for the government? On the one hand, the government likes an increase in X. X is the fraction of the wealth of the agent that is put in the productive asset. So if we put more in the productive asset, there's more production economy, more growth. Government likes that. On the other hand, there are costs to the agent, because if we increase inflation and it results in an increase in X, then agents are going to be consuming less and exposed to more risk because they hold more of the risky assets. So that's a cost to the agent. And the government will take into account the cost of the agent if the government is benevolent, if beta is high. If beta is low, the government will not take into account that. So that's how the policy of the government is going to be set. This is something that takes into account the costs and benefits of increasing X. And this is the 1 over the degree of benevolence of the government. So if the government becomes more benevolent, there is less inflation and people need less to invest in the risky asset, and therefore they are less exposed to the risk of the risky asset, and they're happier. All right. Now, so basically, a bad government is going to do a lot of public spending, a lot of inflation, and poor agents, to react to that, will have to hold a lot of risky assets, and they're going to be very sad because they are exposed to a lot of risk. Now, how does the presence of the crypto change? Yes?
So, sorry, I'm maybe missing it, but typically you need some friction for money to have value, right? So like, I kind of missing what is the friction here?
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
The market is incomplete.
In what sense?
There are only two assets, the risky asset and money.
Okay.
And so there is not a complete set of our securities for each of the states of the world. And that's why money has value.
How interpersonal borrow-
The only two assets are the ones I described. And that's why I said, this is the implementation of an optimal mechanism. There is a micro foundation for that. Okay.
You don't have multiple equilibrium problems, or like the money, can money?
There are multiple equilibria. For example, there is an equilibrium in which money has no value, which we are not looking at. And there are also sunspot equilibria. We're not looking at them. We're looking at the simplest one, which to me is the most realistic when I talk about the dollar, you know. All right, so now, government, if government is bad, can do a lot of bad things to the agent, and the agents have very little way to protect themselves. If I introduce the crypto, this is going to help the agents to protect themselves against the government. So now they're going to hold a fraction of their wealth in capital as before, a fraction in public currency as before, but now a fraction in cryptocurrency. And so I'm assuming crypto avoids taxes, but that could be relaxed. But the important thing, of course, is that crypto is subject to a different monetary policy than official currency. So if the government wants to inflate a lot, then I can flee to crypto. So I want to take, yes.
Sorry, so back to that point, is there no coming back from that? So like take Lebanon, for example, right? The currency lost 90% of its value over time. It's become a dollarized economy. There's no way back. So once that happens, the monetary policy control is lost forever. Is that correct?
That's a very good question. We are looking at a simple model in which government policy is stationary. So there's not going to be suddenly a point in time at which Lebanon, the situation in Lebanon is getting worse than it was before. Situation in Lebanon is always bad. It would be better to have a model in which there can be fluctuations. A previous version of our paper had that, but it was more complicated and we thought we want to simplify. But the qualitative insights are the same.
But inflation, I mean, I just see it in a way that it's a train that can't be stopped, and eventually
Right.
they'll all reach to Lebanon, right? So
No,
everyone
no.
will flee to
No.
more stable currency.
No. If each country, in fact, in our model, we only have one country. And this country, the government of that country has a certain beta, which is a certain degree of benevolence. As a function of the beta of the government, there will be a government policy. That government policy will be stationary. If the beta of the government is low, that means the government is not benevolent. This stationary policy will be very inflationary and will hurt people. Yes.
I have a question. About one other channel that government could affect adoption in crypto by allowing or approving the businesses to which level they can accept crypto. Is this the case that the parameters you mentioned in previous slide can cover it, or this is totally another way that the government can affect in this model?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a very important point that you're making. In our simple model, there is nothing the government can do about the crypto. So we are not allowing the government to prevent people from using crypto. And we know that in some countries like China, government has been doing that. And so this is something we don't have in the model that would be important to have. Yes, Cam.
So in the model, is the beta parameter exogenous? Because you can imagine that it could be endogenized, because with the competition of the crypto, it might affect the behavior.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Cam. This is a great point. So what we have is beta is the same, but the competition of the crypto will affect the behavior of the government, in spite of the fact that beta does not change. If you want, it's a form of counterpower or competition. Yes.
Slightly technical grad school kind of a question.
Yeah, so you had this Brownian motion, right? And we know, like, as far as I remember, the Merton model stocks having not normal returns. And since we are replacing the risky asset with stocks with cryptocurrencies, now, like, like the returns are more skewed in cryptocurrency, right? And then stock, that's an assumption. So that's the,
Yeah, anyway.
That's a very good point. So what is normally distributed in our model is output, return on physical capital. I know it's not a very good assumption in reality, but as you know, the Merton problem, you cannot solve it without an assumption. So, I mean, I cannot solve it. And so skewness, to some extent, there is something that looks a bit like skewness in our model, in the sense of infrequent big negative events. Because the crypto in our model, we are assuming that there is a Poisson process. And when the Poisson process jumps, the value of crypto goes to zero.
Yeah, like a China effect, right? Like that one of the effect of cryptocurrency.
China did not bring the value of crypto to zero.
China, if that is global, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. Oh, that's the thing. That's the Poisson process. Now, so the analysis of the model is similar to what I just showed you. I'm not going to show you again. I know it was painful. So the only difference now is that because there is a crypto, and that's related to Cam's question, the big difference is going to be that now, you remember, X is how much agents put in the real asset, the productive asset. And you remember, X is driven by government policy. If government inflates a lot, X becomes high. And the government, if the government is bad, the government likes to inflate a lot to rip off agents. Here, what's going to happen is there will be a limit to the extent to which the government can do that. The presence of the crypto will put a cap on how much inflation the government can go for, how much money creation the government can go for. And in our model, it's equivalent to say there's a cap on X, which is the fraction of assets held in risky assets.
Gotta say, so because that's actually the argument that you're making there as a good argument for people protecting themselves. It's essentially exactly the argument that we hear from people in policy, in politics, why crypto is bad because you're taking productive capacity and capital away from capital markets.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's that in our model. Absolutely.
Just throwing the argument back at them.
Yeah. It's and you will see. Actually, thank you, Andreas. So this is welfare in our model. As a function of X, and X, is basically a function of government policy. More inflation, larger X. If the government is benevolent, government's going to follow a policy that will maximize agents' welfare. If government is not, so when there is no if there is no cryptocurrency, when the government is not benevolent, government will inflate more and extract more for agents, welfare is lower. And I'm going to your point. If there is crypto, so remember the upper bound, the cap on X imposed by crypto is this thing here. And here is the lambda. What is lambda? It's the intensity of the Poisson process. So if lambda is high, it means that the risk of a crash of the crypto is high. When the risk of the crash of the crypto is high, this becomes large. When this becomes large, the crypto is not imposing much constraint on the government. So when the crypto is very risky, it's so risky that basically people don't want to hold it, and the bad government can do what it wants. If the crypto is less risky, then the bad government can, let's say the crypto is the lambda is such that the x of lambda is here. Now government can't do this anymore, has to do this. And so proving you were right, Andreas. But people are happier. So now competition from crypto is forcing the government to inflate less. And that makes people better off. Yes.
So how important is this lambda? Can you, if you said just set lambda to 0, can you make all your arguments other than this comparative statics?
Yes, we can make all the arguments, including this. It's going to be a comparative static in terms of another thing, but we have actually in the paper a simple case where beta is equal to 0 and the computations are easier. But here I'm having lambda because I think lambda is interesting to discuss.
Okay.
But the qualitative insights are the same.
Yeah, because
it's going to depend on beta. Then I'm going to do comparative statics on beta. Yes, I see.
In equilibrium, does anyone hold crypto? Or in this model, it seems like they wouldn't, but.
That's a very good question. Thanks a lot. So here, crypto is so risky that people don't hold crypto. Here, crypto is less risky. Now we have an interior equilibrium. People will hold some crypto and some official currency. And basically, their optimality condition will be such that they're indifferent between the two, weighing the cost and benefit of crypto and official currency.
But why do they hold anything? And if, like, I understand they're indifferent, but why do they hold anything?
So in equilibrium, they will be indifferent.
Because of the holding.
Because of what?
But they have to hold in equilibrium in order for the indifference to hold. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, indifference condition is going to be an equilibrium condition.
Now, this thing, if people are indifferent and I'm the government and I decrease a little bit the inflation rate, I capture 100%.
No, because it's not a bang thing. When you're looking at your indifference condition, it's if you increase a little bit your crypto holdings, you're going to increase a little bit your exposure to the crash risk and your risk averse. So you're going to trade off these two things.
So are agents allowed to have negative balance on cash and crypto?
Well, that's a very good question. So you could do that. The model would be more difficult to interpret, but yes, you could do that.
Would that complete the market or?
No, it wouldn't complete the market. No. Yes. Okay. At the back.
So just the credible threat of crypto enforces the condition on the government?
So thank you. That's a very good question. It's not a game theoretic model. It's a competitive equilibrium model. So on the equilibrium path, for this value of parameters, people are holding crypto. Thank you. I think there was another. Yes.
Government allowed to engage in the crypto economy as agents or not to hedge against their own inflation?
I don't think yes, I don't think we prevent the government from doing that, but government does not, it's not interesting for the government. To hedge against inflation, you just have to reduce inflation. There's a more direct path to that because they set the inflation. So here, crypto is good, held by agents, disciplines government, but in fact, there can be parameter values such that this XC of lambda is here. So we're going even more to Andreas now. Now, the crypto is constraining even the good government, taking away money from real assets, as Andreas was saying. Yeah, bad crypto, huh? And so that's my conclusion. Without crypto, the predatory government uses monetary policy to extract rents from agents. There's too much inflation and taxes when the government is not benevolent. With crypto, if the risk of crypto crash is high, people don't hold the crypto. If there is a low risk of crypto crash, then agents will hold crypto, especially if the government is not benevolent. But even if the government is benevolent, they will hold a tiny bit of it. And so when the government is not benevolent, having the crypto is really helping people. That's, if you want, the HEC case. But there is also the anti-crypto case that our model, I did not want to do this, the model did it. It seems like in some cases, the presence of the crypto is actually making people worse off.